We're joined by an incredible panel of speakers today. But before we begin, I'd like to note that we have interpretation to Spanish, Russian, and French. Please go to the globe sign at the bottom of your screen of Zoom, and please select the language that you want to listen the meeting in. Even if you want to listen the meeting in English, please select the English channel so you'll be able to hear the questions asked in different languages in their interpretations to English. If our interpreters kindly note in the chat the Spanish, French, and Russian explanations of how to access the interpretation, that will be very helpful. Hello, everyone. Welcome again. We're delighted to have you in the first Women's Major Group meeting of the year. Just one last time, we have interpretation to French, Spanish, and Russian. Please select the globe at the bottom of your Zoom screen to select the language you'd like to listen in. There are explanations also in the chat in the respective languages. If you want to listen to the meeting in English, please also select the English channel so you can hear the questions asked in different languages. So without further ado, it's very exciting for me to start this meeting. 2021 is actually a year of many firsts for the Women's Major Group. Most of you probably know we just had our new listserv addresses that we're very happy to use now. And this is actually one of our firsts as well. This is the first webinar of the SDGs and the UN human rights mechanisms from a feminist perspective webinar series. We're hoping to hold until this June to help with our, to support our members in strengthening the bridges between the SDGs and the UN human rights mechanisms. And of course, we couldn't have started with anything else but Sido, often referred to as the Constitution of Women's Human Rights, which have supported women's rights advocacy for decades now. And we're very lucky to be joined by experts and activists who've been working on this issue for many years. Just for all of our guests, the Women's Major Group is a global intersectional feminist collective that spans throughout the world. And our job is to facilitate and support our members in their advocacy on the sustainable development processes, especially at the regional and global levels. We are so lucky we had 150 registrations to this event, the highest ever for our monthly meetings. And we are currently joined by over 70 colleagues. Thank you all so much. This is a really exciting moment for all of us. So in another new, I'd like to give the floor now to Buky, our new Anglophone Africa organizing partner who will be moderating this event. Buky, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Inaz. Really appreciate it. And good afternoon, everyone. Hopefully you can all hear me. Can people wave if they can hear me? Just wave. You can hear me. Hello, good afternoon. Great to see all your lovely faces. And please, to the interpreters, if I start to talk too fast, because sometimes I do that when I'm excited, just put in the chat so that I can slow down and make sure that you can hear me. I really want to say thank you to all of the panelists who are going to join us today. I was reading their bios and got very, very excited. So I know we have a lot of great insights coming from these amazing women and the work that they've been doing. And I also really look forward to the group conversation that we're going to have. So I'm going to do the introductions. I'm going to try and move things along. I think that's my role here as the moderator, is to move things along, make sure things are moving along and we're keeping to time, so we are making advantage of this really great opportunity that has already been introduced. So in terms of why we are even trying to have these conversations, as been said, and we're looking at the SDGs and the UN human rights mechanisms, specifically from a feminist perspective, it's for a few reasons. One is to highlight the interplay between Agenda 2030, the SDGs, and human rights in particular. To support and enhance the implementation of the SDGs from a feminist and a human rights-based perspective. So not to just say, oh, we don't want to leave anyone behind, but in what ways do we actually make sure, we don't do that? How do we respect their rights? How do we reinforce their right to exist and to participate in these processes? It's also to increase our knowledge and capacity, because of course we never know everything. And it's really great to just learn from the different members who've been able to engage in all these different processes, so we can learn from each other and continue to strengthen our advocacy. And this is especially around utilizing the SDGs and the human rights mechanisms. And it's really also to, be able to better establish contact with these mechanisms and other human rights-based organizations that are working at the intersection of gender equality and UN human rights mechanisms as they were. And another thing that I just want to mention for everyone on the call, that this call is being recorded. So just for you to know, so if there's any issues or concerns, we really apologize, but it's just to record to make sure we keep it for prosperity. And of course, I'm sure some people would be interested who couldn't join us today as well. So just to let you know about that. So that's really why these series are happening. So it's really just to increase our knowledge, to strengthen the linkages between these different mechanisms, and so we understand it better. So now, because I'm not the one you came here to listen to, let me jump right into it. And we're gonna first have Dr. Leah Nadaraia, who is a Cdo committee member, who's going to speak to us for a little bit about 10 minutes. But before I ask a question, I'm just going to introduce her because she sounds amazing. She's a Cdo committee member since 2015. And she's also a member of the Cdo working group on working methods. Also the Cdo UN Women / SDG working group. She's also the Cdo IPU working group, and she's also in the Cdo and other treaties working group as well. She's also in the working group for cooperation with regional human rights mechanisms. So, she's the best person to introduce this topic. She also holds a PhD in psychology and has taught around issues of gender in different universities. She also continues to conduct advocacy on gender-sensitive national policies and legislation, especially in her country of Georgia. So, Dr. Nadaraia, thanks again for joining us and for making time. Definitely seems like you have a really busy schedule. So we're really glad you could join us. So my first, we have really 2 questions for you, which we hope you will cover in the short 10 minutes that we give you. So the first question is, what is the connection between Cdo and Agenda 2030? So, how do we bring these 2 things together? What is the connection between them? That's the first question. And then building on that, what mechanism can be used to strengthen states members, which is a country's responsibility on Agenda 2030's implementation based on Cdo's experience? So learning from Cdo, how can, what mechanisms can states used to strengthen their responsibility on implementing Agenda 2030. So we're going to give you 10 minutes to help answer those questions. Thanks again.
Thank you, dear Buky. I want to warmly welcome all participants of this important webinar. It is a pleasure to be with you all and discuss interlinkage between Sido and agenda. I was asked two questions. What is connection between Sido and Agenda 2030, and what mechanisms can be used to strengthen the state members' responsibility of Agenda 30 implementation based on Sido experience. I'll start with the statement. Both Sido and the certain provisions of Agenda 2030 in its essence are targeted to promote the responsibility of the UN member states to achieve gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls, SDG 5. Agenda 30 is a complex document, and despite the fact that it underlines the integrated nature of social, economic, and environmental development, it fails short to lay out comprehensive human rights-based approach to sustainable development, or to recognize the universal and cross-cutting nature of respecting, protecting, and fulfilling human rights. However, if the goals are achieved as planned, there is a huge transformative potential to lift millions of women worldwide out of poverty and improve their lives, because of Agenda 2030 offers new possibilities to create a bridge between the development and human rights institutions on gender equality. The Cdo Committee, during the process of definition of Agenda 2030, requested that whatever accountability mechanism is adopted, the Cdo Committee, along with other human rights treaty bodies, should have a critical role in ensuring accountability for gender equality through its periodic review of the state party reports, its consideration of individual communication, its inquiry procedure, and the systemic exchange of information between the treaty bodies, and new accountability mechanism designed to monitor the new goals, targets, and indicators. In order to overcome solar approach, UN Women, which has issued a position paper for monitoring attainment of the indicator of Agenda 2030 and provides regular substantive inputs to intergovernmental processes, agreed to work with the Sido Committee in order to achieve SDG 5, including Target 5.1, against discrimination against women. The partnership added value to the ongoing process and political coherence and monitoring of structural causes of gender-based discrimination against women. The added value of the partnership between two bodies consists mainly in the fact that it could be good practice for breaking Solo's approach and keeping UN fit for purpose. The Sido has been considered the principal legal framework for assessing discrimination against women and girls, and the Sido Committee plays a role in the review process towards the implementation of 2030 agenda as both data source and monitoring body for SDG Target 5.1 and all forms of discrimination against all women and girls everywhere, and its indicator 511. Whether or not legal frameworks are in place to promote, enforce, and monitor equality and non-discrimination on the basis of sex. Therefore, in line with the proposal, the new Sido guidelines were developed to be used not only to examine whether state parties respect, protect, and fulfill human rights of women according to the Sido articles, but also to see if progress on track vis-a-vis the SDG Target 5.1 and Indicator 511. The revision of the Sido guidelines has taken in consideration all these dimensions, in particular considering that Human Rights Council encourages states to give due consideration to information, observations, and recommendations from human rights mechanisms when implementing and monitoring progress of 2030 agenda, so that national policies aimed at achieving sustainable development goals and contribute to enjoyment of human rights. In a holistic view of SDGs, the achievement of gender equality and women's empowerment can be interpreted as having 4 dimensions: countering stigma, prejudice, humiliation, and violence. The indicator 511 has a tier 3 status, and the Sido is indicated as a source and as a monitoring agency towards UN Women, together with UN Women and OHR. Ratification of Sido makes it legally binding for state parties to implement the right of equality and non-discrimination on the various articles of the Convention. The obligation includes women's rights under Article 1 and 2 of the Convention, which define discrimination against women and require to adopt appropriate legislative and other measures prohibiting all discrimination against women. The concluding observation issued by the Cdo Committee at the end of each constructive dialogue with the state party on basis of state party reports, with the support of NGO shadow reports, UN documents, and background information of HR are sourced for assessment. Given the expertise of the committee and the information is already has collected, its active role in monitoring specific 511 indicator is feasible, as a SIGI index based on Cdo Committee COBs has already proved. The indicator 511, in order to track progress toward this indicator, broadly framed in Target 5.1 and all forms of discrimination against women and girls, UN Women has proposed the position paper, composite structural indicator involving Cdo Committee. The proposed indicator was proxy that measures number of countries with a legal framework that promote gender equality and non-discrimination against all women and girls. The proposed indicator is a binary structural indicator, interplanned by a package of criteria that countries have to meet in order to answer yes. This can include the existence of legislation on equal pay, minimum age of marriage, equal rights over inheritance and property, gender quotas for parliament, paid maternity and paternity leave, dimensions of discrimination which are covered by detailed provisions of the Sido Convention and therefore are within the monitoring mandate of the committee. This is a good example of the value of involving international human rights mechanism and monitoring SDG targets, which are not only highly relevant to human rights enjoyment, but can also be more effectively monitored by engaging with human rights standards and instruments. New Sido guidelines were finalized in 2018, but they are not sufficiently utilized, as well as table of treaty provisions and targets and goals elaborated by the committee. So there is a way to go ahead, and with this I will end my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Leah. That was really, wow. I think you packed a lot of information into 10 minutes for us. So usually I know with moderators, they want to, wrap up or give a synopsis, but I feel like if I do that, I'm going to miss out on all of the key things that you've already mentioned. So hopefully people were taking notes like I was, especially around the accountability and the linkages in terms of the SDG 5 and which key indicators you were tracking and those things. So I think it's quite important. For everyone, please, if you have questions so you don't forget it, you can put it in the chat. So put it in the chat box because I already can see hands in terms of questions. Or feel free to do applauses as well, because I know that we're not in person. So do applauses and thumbs ups so we can really encourage those who are sharing with us. But if you do have questions for Dr. Leah, please put it in the chat so we can gather it. And Naz is helping to gather it so that we can come back and ask later. So let's make use of the chat function and our reactions as well. So thank you so much for that. I almost got carried away because I was taking notes and not looking at the time. So thank you so much for that. So we will come back to you with questions. So please stick around with us, Dr. Leah, for questions. So the next person that I am going to go to is Priyanthi Fernando. Priyanthi is the Executive Director of IWRAW Asia Pacific. She's a feminist, social development and communications professional with over 30 years of experience, both in Sri Lanka and overseas. She has worked in the area of technology, infrastructure, and poverty. She's also been passionate about issues of justice and about fighting structural inequalities relating to gender, access to technology, poverty, and livelihood. She has also led several organizations, the Center for Poverty Analysis, the International Forum for Rural Transport and Development, and the Sri Lanka Country Program of Intermediate Technology Development Group, now called Practical Action. So she's bringing a lot of experience to this conversation. So Priyanthi, are you with us? Can you just let us know that you're with us?
Yes, I am.
Great, welcome. Great to hear your voice. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate you taking the time to be here to share your experience with us. And so I'm going to ask you 2 questions as well and give you about 10 minutes to be able to help us respond. And so the question is, the question is, what are the connections you are utilizing between CEDAW and the SDGs? So that's really the first question. What are the connections you utilizing in your work between CEDAW and the SDGs? And then building on that, could you briefly talk about the role of your organization in supporting women's rights organizations in their CEDAW review?
Okay, thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here and thank you for inviting us to be part of this meeting. I think I'm going to take the two questions in reverse order because I think talking a little bit briefly about what IWRAW Asia Pacific does to support women's rights organizations in the CEDAW reviews actually sets the context for how we are using the connections between CEDAW and the SDGs. Many thanks to Nadaraia for explaining extensively the relationship between CEDAW and the SDGs. I think my presentation, which I think I have asked,
yeah, she's pulling it up right now.
Fernando is going to put up because I thought it might be easier, especially since we are working in multiple languages, to have something to look at, is much more about practical issues and is much more process oriented. So Sanaz, if you could. Okay, so if you could just go to the next slide. I'll talk a little bit about how IWRAW Asia Pacific supports women's rights organizations to engage with the CEDAW reviews. This has been our core work for about 3 decades. We support women's groups from the Global South mainly, but also marginalized groups from the Global North interact with the CEDAW committee during the CEDAW reviews. And this has in many ways enabled the CEDAW committee members to ground their recommendations to states on the lived experiences of women in the different countries. And it has also given the women's groups an opportunity to be represented in the international CEDAW space. How do we actually do this? We facilitate groups to come to Geneva when the CEDAW reviews were taking place physically in that city and before that in New York. And we mentor them on the process of the reviews and how they could use their presence most effectively. We also support the women's groups organize their oral presentations and their lunch briefings with the committee. Some women also attend the From Global to Local program that we organize as IWRAW Asia Pacific before every session. This helps them fine-tune their demands and helps them learn more about the CEDAW process. Also, they get an opportunity to meet informally with other activists from other countries. Post the review, of course, after the CEDAW committee has had the dialogue with the state parties and has made their recommendations, which we call the concluding observations, the state parties have to implement these recommendations. And I guess it's at this point that civil society's national level advocacy becomes critical. Women's rights organizations need to leverage the concluding observations to ensure that governments take the recommendations into account. Through our work, we have a tool which we call the Cdo Compliance Framework that also can help guide groups in their post-review advocacy at a national level. You can find this on our website under the tab of resources. This year, because there were no state reviews, we still wanted to hold that civil society space. So we organized online discussions with NGOs in the countries that were scheduled to be reviewed and collated their issues and shared them with the committee in two collaborative NGO statements, one in July and one in November. But in addition to bringing people physically to the review itself, we work before that to help women's rights groups develop shadow reports to the committee. In the initial years, this has meant initiating shadow report trainings. and we did many of those. But over the years, I think IWRAW Asia Pacific's work has created a critical mass of activists who have the knowledge and capacity to do this. So now we just respond to demands of a particular group in a country who invite us to do this training. Next slide, please. Shadow reports, of course, are typically developed by a national coalition of women's groups. What we have seen in more recent years is that women facing multiple and intersecting forms of discrimination are seeing Sido as a space where they can raise their voices and claim their rights. They are also keen to share their particular issues with the committee in more detail than is possible in a national coalition report. So in the recent past, we have worked with many of these groups to develop thematic guidelines that complement our general shadow report guidelines. So we have guidelines on women and work. We have guidelines on women in conflict situations based on GR30, for women with disabilities, for women sex workers, for women using drugs. And if you go, this slide shows some of them, and if you go to the next one, you will see some examples of others. And they're all, again, available for everybody on the website. So given that this is our core business, why and how do we connect Cdo and the SDGs? I guess, as Nadaraia said, the creation of the Sustainable Development Goals and the 2030 Agenda was very much, the women's movement was very active actively participating in it all from the early stages. And I guess without that participation, the SDG framework would have been much less transformative. Eurasia Pacific's engagement with the 2030 Agenda and the SDGs also happened long before 2016. But it is based on the principle that it is a legal, political, and moral imperative to ground development priorities in human rights. So it is important that SDGs help states achieve their human rights obligations. It is not for the human rights treaties to help achieve the SDGs. That is the point. That's the way we come to that. But even though the 2030 Agenda actually recognizes human rights, recognizes gender equality, and as Nadaraia has just explained very extensively, has a specific goal and indicators, we feel that it has actually not sufficiently or centered existing international commitments, notably international human rights norms and standards. So we firmly believe that without an explicit rights framework, without clear and unambiguous reference to existing international human rights standards and norms, without a robust accountability framework, the SDGs can't succeed in achieving equality of outcomes. So it is because of that skepticism that we decided that we need to work on harmonizing the SDGs and Cdo frameworks. The treaty body system can contribute a much needed dimension of accountability that is otherwise absent in the Sustainable Development Framework, in the VNRs or in the HLPF. Again, Madam Nadaraia mentioned that Cdo Committee's working group on the SDGs developed a comprehensive guideline for states to report on the SDGs in their periodic reviews. Since that was developed in 2018, the committee adopted more detailed reference to states' commitments to the 2030 Agenda and held them in more detail accountable to relevant sustainable development goals and indicators that match the articles of the convention. But if we take 2019, this only happened in 13 of the 21 countries reviewed. And in the other 8, there was only a very general paragraph on accountability to the 2030 Agenda. So there's still a lot of work for women's rights organizations to do if more women's rights organizations make the SDG CEDAW connection in their shadow reports, then it is also likely that the CEDAW concluding observations will also become more detailed. Next slide, please. So we tried to start making these connections, and we began by bringing several women from around the world together in the Global South Women's Forum on Sustainable Development, where we were able to have conversations around development issues using a human rights lens, using a gender equality lens. We had these, this has become now an annual event. We had one in Cambodia in 2016, Rwanda 2017, Jordan 2018, in Malaysia 2019, and last in 2020 December, we had a global event online. Some of these were region specific, so the Jordan one was focused on the MENA region, and others were theme specific. So the Malaysia one was focused on Southeast Asia, but also on the issue of women's work. In addition to the Global South Women's Forum, we also started developing a tool that we thought would help women's rights organizations hold governments accountable to both their SDG and CEDAW commitments. We used as our base that very important resource by the Danish Institute of Human Rights. You can see the URL in the slide, which this resource links the different SDG goals and indicators to the different articles of the different treaty bodies, including CEDAW. And we developed a tool that women's rights organizations can use to integrate SDGs into the shadow reports or prepare civil society reports to national, regional, and global reviews of the SDGs. The tool can also be used to advocate to the state how to use the SDGs as a tool to accelerate progress towards achieving human rights obligations. And it can influence the development of SDG indicators. The global indicators are probably already fixed, but at a national level, it can help develop national indicators. Next slide, please. The work on the tool is still a work in progress, and the tool at the moment is just an Excel sheet, which is why I haven't really been able to share it with you in this presentation. But it is evolving, and our ambition is to develop this into an interactive online tool that is widely accessible in terms of language, ability, data, etc. We would also like to expand the tool. Right now it's related to the articles of the convention, but we would also like to expand the tool to include the CEDAW general recommendations. But for now, you can see how our partners in Palestine use this tool to develop a report to CEDAW and the HLPF in 2018, which they reported to both in the same year. And I guess if Luna's here on this call, she can tell you more about that. Unfortunately, in 2020, we did very little work on the tool, but so we need to pick it up again in 2021. So that's practically what we've been doing, and I look forward to your comments, your thoughts, and your support to this work. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much for that. That was really amazing and interesting work. I'm definitely really interested in that SDG CEDAW tool and looking forward to seeing it in the future, because I think that's something useful for everyone in terms of the work that we're doing around accountability and better connecting CEDAW and the SDG mechanisms in particular. So there are some questions on the chat. Specifically, and some people are asking for the presentations and the recordings. I don't know, Shanaz and Priyanthi, can you respond to some of those questions on the chat as well so that people know? While we'll take the more substantive questions when we get through all of the presentations, because I just want to give everyone a chance to get through their presentations so we don't lose too much time, and then we can then take questions afterwards. So I'm just going to quickly jump to the next person. I really want to welcome Valentina. Welcome. She's from the Gender Center and Platform for Gender Inequality. She is an associate professor who has 18 years of experience in women, human rights, and gender equality promotion. She's also the president of an NGO, the Gender Center, and is the co-founder of the Platform for Gender Equality in Moldova. At the international level, she has contributed as a speaker and co-organizers on public consultations on sustainable development, Beijing +25, among other things. Science 2020. She is also an OP of the Women's Major Group as well. And she's also co-author of Sido Shadow Reports in 2006, 2013, and of course, more recently in 2020. So really welcome, Dr. Valentina. We're glad to have you here as well. So I'm just gonna ask you a quick question as well, and we're going to give you about 5 minutes to go through it. And really the question is, in order to ensure the large participation of women's NGOs in national, regional, and global forums on the SDGs, what lessons have you learned in terms of the work that you have been doing? And in your case in particular, and I'm thinking Moldova, what has the SDGs contributed to the review of Sido in particular? So giving you 5 minutes.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of us. Thank you for the question. And I think today we discuss very, very important issues. Thanks to my colleague who contributed a lot to organizing this meeting. I think all these questions are very important in order to understand how civil society and especially how our women's NGO can contribute to sustainable development at national, regional, and global level. At the beginning, I would like to mention that as recognized by the 2030 agenda, NGO play critical role in SDG implementation. We organized many actions, different activity, implemented many programs. But the most important role of NGO is in monitoring and evaluation of Agenda 2030 implementation. Question is how to ensure the high level of participation of women's NGO at national level. For us in Moldova, I think it was very important to establish national network. In Moldova, thanks to Platform for Gender Equality, several NGOs, including women's NGO, are involved in SDG implementation and monitoring. As important tool for us also was a special elaboration of shadow report to VNR, enlarged consultation process with several NGOs, especially at local level. It was very, very important to offer space to different women's groups for express the voice. It's important to mention cooperation with different partners as support for our international partner, Women Engagement for Common Future, UN Women, UNDESA, Women's Major Group. Especially, I would like to mention that at regional UNICEF level, we received large support of Women's Major Group at regional and global level too. One of the tools for us was that thanks to Women's Major Group, our shadow report was placed on website of Women's Major Group. And it offered a lot of visibility of our work and strengthened our image and our capacity how to work at regional and global level. Also, I would like to mention regional RCM, civil society engagement mechanism that offer political space for many women's NGOs at regional and global level, ensuring synergy between women's group and other groups. And I would like focus your attention on the issues that our experience on VNR process, thanks to support of women's major group at regional level and global level, contribute to strengthening capacity of several women's NGOs. As lessons learned, I would like to mention following. Women's organization can play significant role in successful Agenda 2030 implementation, monitoring and evaluation and review. But it's important to engage all our NGOs at the beginning in this process. Not only in evaluation, but at the beginning. Women's NGO and other civil society organizations need increased resources, time and opportunity for implementation, monitoring and evaluation process. Because we identify sometimes the situation when women NGO are engaged, involved on voluntary basis. But other NGO has support from different partners, organizations. Also, it is crucial to ensure strong connection between SDG and Beijing Platform for Action, Sido, and UN Resolution 3025. We strongly recommend in this case to take into account the regional and global human rights monitoring mechanism, such Sido. Leah mentioned very well these issues. It was an honor for me to present our civil society together with my other colleague in Geneva the last year to Cdo committee, our shadow reports. We advocate to integrate SDG in our shadow reports. And it was very useful for us and for our government too. But it's important to mention that Cdo committee recommendations addressed to our government to stress attention on implementation of Agenda 2030, it was very useful. It's very good advocacy instrument for all of us. And at the end, I would like to mention also that one of the preconditions and one of the tools for all of us is our solidarity. Our solidarity at regional and global level, because only in common effort we can contribute to sustainable development. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Valentina. That was very powerfully stated and really impressive work that has been happening, which I'm sure all of us can learn from, and I'm seeing some questions for you. So we will be coming back to you with some questions just to further go in, because we know you don't have enough time to really talk through all the work that you all have been doing. All right, so I'm going to quickly jump to Berfu. Berfu, are you there? And hopefully I'm pronouncing your name correctly. I'm so sorry.
Yes, I'm here. This is correct.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, welcome. Berfu has been engaged in activism as a feminist for over a span of 10 years. She holds a graduate degree in critical and cultural studies. She has been working in the advocacy program at Women for Women's Human Rights in New Ways for about 4.5 years, where she continues her work as the advocacy coordinator. She has also actively contributed to national as well as international and multilateral level advocacy for advancing women's rights and gender equality. So welcome again. So just to quickly jump to your question so we can give you time to be able to answer it. In 2019, Turkey went through the VNR review, so the Voluntary National Review process, and the Sido review within the same 2 weeks. So it was all happening at the same time. So we're really curious, how did you ensure a dialogue between the two processes? How did that work in terms of, them feeding off each other and being able to, ensure that you were able to push both agendas? Are you there? Did you hear me? I hope we didn't lose you. I think she's frozen. Yeah. Okay. So I think maybe while we wait for you to come back, maybe we'll move on to the next speaker. And when she's back, we will then go. All right. Okay. So we'll go to Luna. Luna, are you there? Luna Saadeh, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Hi, everyone.
Okay, great, Luna. Hi, Luna, welcome. All right, great. So Luna has a master's degree in women's development and law from Berfu University. She's a gender and women's rights expert with 20 years of experience working in the Middle East with international development agencies, local government, non-governmental human rights organizations, and the private sector. She has consulted on gender-related issues such as women political participation, gender-based violence, women's health, women's rights with different international and national organizations in development and humanitarian contexts. She also has a lot of experience on protecting the human rights of women and girls under international law and convention instruments. She's also a member of several executive committees in the MENA region and in Palestine. So can you just share with us what is your experience using CEDAW to support your advocacy at the high-level political forum? Could you share with us your experience? Because your experience for many of us who have seen it is very inspirational. So how did you prepare? And how did you take on this advocacy at HPLF and afterwards in Palestine? So you have about 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'll start with the preparation for our experience in connecting CEDAW with the SDGs. The preparation started in 2017. As you know, all Palestine endorsed CEDAW in 2014, and we started working on the report because the initial report by the state was supposed to be submitted between 2017 and 18, but it was late due to different reasons. We will talk about it later. In 2017, a coalition, CEDAW coalition, was formed from different non-governmental organizations and women's organizations. The total of the organization is 46. It's led by the GUPW and still active to date. The coalition, when they started working on CEDAW shadow report, several trainings took place, and it was supported in the support with the UN Women and IWRAW. 2 regional trainings took place in Jordan in order to have many experiences from different Arab countries on how they worked on CEDAW shadow report. And IWRAW was facilitating these 2 training workshops. When Palestine went through the VNR in 2018, IWRAW sent us a reminder that we should take consideration of the VNR and the work of the SDGs through our work on CEDAW shadow report. So what happened is that the civil society organizations, when they started working on the several report on the SDGs, a group of representatives from the coalition went through a training of a right shop workshop led by IWRAW to train TOT how we can work on the log frame that has been developed by IWRAW and our work on the SDGs at the same time with the CEDAW. The opportunity was that both reports have to be submitted in the same month in July. So this was a very important opportunity for us that 2 reports were going in line together. We finished the shadow report by the end of June, and we also the SDGs at the same time. The SDG was like a more analytical report. We tried to use the log frame, and we added not only the CEDAW, we referred to many instruments, international conventions and articles, such as because we are a state under occupation, we saw that we have to integrate the IHL into our work and the analysis of the report. And we also refer to 1325 since we are focusing on women in that area. We worked on these two instruments, of course, the Sido, which was the umbrella of the whole work. This work gave us like a comprehensive analysis how we can link both together under the same articles. We tried to see where's the article of Sido, and then we connected it to the SDG goal. And then we saw where also other conventions that could be linked to these articles. The coalition had the priorities of some of the main issues that we highlighted the issue on it. Because Cdo report, as you know, all shadow report, we can't cover everything. What we do that in the SDGs, we try to highlight and raise more issues that is very important, but we didn't have the chance to raise it in the Cdo shadow report. So we did these two links together, and we give like the committee, the Cdo committee, more comprehensive information about the situation about the Palestinian women situation in the OPT. This was very useful, and I think it's a strength, because in that way, both reports was like connecting and linked together, and it helped the Cdo committee to see the situation in a very intensive and comprehensive way. After that, IWRAW helped us to, after we finished the first draft and it was discussed among our colleagues in the coalition, the 46 organizations, and they put their feedback in the report. We noticed that there are some issues in the Cdo report that should be developed, or we can have more in depth in that area. So we tried to have from the SDGs, and we try to integrate in the shadow report to give it more, it could be more a powerful tool for the Cdo committee. After we finished all this international discussion about the two reports, we submitted the Cdo, of course, to the Cdo committee, and for the civil organization report through IWRAW, we submitted it to the HLPF and to Cdo committee. What was interesting is that most of the recommendations and many of the questions raised in the SDGs, the committee highlighted through the revision, the session on Cdo for the state of Palestine. And in that way, it was all the issues was covered during the session of Cdo committee, because they have both reports at the same time. That was the process, how we worked on the international level and how we developed the two reports. And we succeeded, as you see, that the HLPF also, when they reviewed the civil society organizations, they highlighted some issues, and they raised issues to the state of Palestine to take into consideration. And also the Cdo committee, also there are many recommendations that highlighted in their final recommendations, and it was based on both reports and not only the one which is the shadow report. On the national level, we succeeded in having many impacts, such as, first of all, what we did as an advocacy tool, to have it as an advocacy tool, we submitted the SDGs report to the President Mahmoud Abbas in order to take it into consideration for further planning, national planning. Then we translated the report into Arabic, and we distributed it to all the members in the coalition, to the ministries, major ministries in the PA, also to the political parties. We distributed it, and with discussion. We sent it also to different organizations who's working on the development and the humanitarian aspect. On the other hand, there was many coalitions that has been formed one of the main or major things is that we highlighted the issue of women refugees in the Arab countries, because we noticed that their shadow reports and their and the state reports didn't mention Palestinian refugees in their countries. So what we did as a General Union, we did a regional workshop in Jordan, and we raised this issue so that they will take it into consideration in the SDGs reports and in the shadow report. And we are working now in strengthening this coalition that has been formed in 2019 to try to keep the framework, the log frame of IWRAW, we used in our report to be like the focal instrument in drafting the reports for the other regions, for the Palestinian refugee coalitions in the other regions. I think this is mainly what we did in a summary, because I have 5 minutes and I exceeded, but the obstacles, of course, the prolonged occupation, that when we are talking about SDGs, we can't have any development while we have occupation, because all the interventions is all humanitarian. And when we try to go to the step of development, I think all the, it's a major obstacle. We can't do that. Yeah, you have the occupation, you have destruction, you have isolation, everything you can imagine we are facing here in Palestine. The second thing now we are facing on Sido and the SDGs at the same time, because we are working on the major issues, is the fundamental fundamentalism movement, hostilities for the women's organizations. Now we are under this pressure. We can't find now the support from the government, neither also from the organizations, grassroots organizations, which we are trying hard now as a general union to unify our feminist discourse among our women organization and human rights organization to face this new approach and the new hostility from this fundamentalism movement. I think it's related also not only in Palestine, it's a regional issue. It's not only Palestine. Yeah. So this is in summary, and I'm looking forward for any question to have more discussion. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Luna. I know, sorry, that 5 minutes is not a lot to cover all of the amazing work that you're doing and to discuss the challenges, but thank you for managing to squeeze it in that short period of time. You can definitely also check the chat for some of the questions that are coming up, just because we're running out of time. So if those of you who have presented could also check out the chat, Sanaz is also collecting questions that we would answer, but if there are those you can just quickly respond to in the chat, that would also help out so that we can have a discussion. So now I'm just going to quickly welcome back Berfu, who is back online.
Yeah, hello.
Hello, welcome back. Okay, so did you get a, yes. So right now, we're just really going to quickly ask you the question that I'd mentioned before, you know, the fact that it was happening within 2 weeks of each other, the VNR review and the Cdo review. How did you and the team ensure a dialogue between the two processes? So you have about 5 minutes.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was on 2016, not 2019, the 7th periodic review of Turkey by Cdo Committee and HLPF, in which Turkey presented a voluntary national review, took place both in July. And on July 15th, there was a failed coup attempt in Turkey. Afterwards, a state of emergency was declared. Thus, the two events couldn't be communicated further by my organization at the national level because of this negative development. It is important to say that since then, Turkey became more anti-democratic, public institutions became more anti-transparent and more exclusive of independent civil society. And the civic space has become more and more closed and more antagonized by the populist political discourse. So advocacy for gender equality has become more challenging, and we don't know the situation of the SDG implementation at the national level. It is also useful to highlight that the international conventions like Istanbul Convention and Cdo are under attack by anti-rights actors. So having said that, political overview, we can move on to the interlinkages between the processes. I thought it was really important to flag out this political situation that we are living under right now. WWHR in 2016 actively participated in both of these spaces, the CEDAW in Geneva and the SDGs in New York. That year, SDG 5 was one of the thematic goals to be reviewed, and Turkey covered gender issues in the report. WWHR used this opportunity to flag out that these two processes are actually interconnected and that each should be translated and interpreted in relation to each other. The means we used before, during, and after the sessions were as follows. Before the sessions, we contributed in shadow reporting. We wrote and disseminated an op-ed. During the sessions, we disseminated information notes and made presentations during the review sessions to highlight the two. After the processes, we published a press release and an information note, which is disseminated through listservs. We made presentations at national or international meetings to discuss how we made advocacy in both of these spaces and how we interconnected them together. It is important to say that we tried to make all the advocacy work collectively in these spaces with existing national and or international platforms, and our representatives in both processes were in communication all the time. To have a closer look at the processes separately, I can say that in the CEDAW process, we, as a strategy, wrote a more comprehensive shadow report. We contributed in the writing of a more comprehensive shadow report, while the HLPF one was shorter and more focused on the political will. During the session, we were involved in presenting the report and holding the lunch briefing and participating to informal meetings with Cdo committee. We prepared an information note on the connections with SDGs and Cdo, and we highlighted the SDGs at every possible occasion. Cdo shadow report was emphasizing both the issue of the gongos and the SDG linkages, since SDGs don't cover human rights perspective enough. So we think that it is very important to flag this out. As a result, the SDGs were included in the concluding observations that year. Also, it is very important to highlight that the SDGs in Cdo process, because Cdo has a more accountable mechanism than the HLPF mechanism. In the HLPF, we prepared a shadow report also on the implementation of the SDGs with a focus on gender equality and women's status in Turkey. The shadow report underlined the importance of connections with other United Nations human rights mechanisms, including Cdo, since the SDGs lack this perspective. The op-ed WWHR prepared and disseminated before the sessions also emphasized on this connection and calling Turkey to ensure that the outcomes of these mechanisms should all feed into each other. We also highlighted in the report that to achieve the SDGs, Cdo recommendations and concluding observations should be implemented. These are the interlinkages, interconnection activities that we made in these two spaces. To conclude, I want to say, to make both these processes work to gain real outcomes, we first of all need a political will for participatory and inclusive democracy and the rule of law. In contexts where rights-based civic space is under immense pressure, it becomes a big challenge to use these mechanisms to advance equality and the rights for all. So I believe we should be insisting on making the interlinkages between all these UN mechanisms with an emphasis on strong democracies and independent institutions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I think that really was a strong wrap up to the conversation. that we have had so far. I really just want to say another thank you to all of our panelists. All of you did amazing in being concise, even though it was difficult with the amount of time that we gave you all, but you really shared some really concrete, practical things, shared experiences. You managed to pack it all in that short period of time. And I think a lot of it really resonated, at least that's what I'm getting from the chat, is that people really found all of your presentations very useful. They also were able to see themselves in some of those experiences as well, and have been having conversations around it. So really want to say thank you for that. Okay, so now want to jump right into questions. So the first question, I'm going to pose it to Leah because I think it came up during the conversation that Leah was presenting on. And the question is from Catherine Klein, I believe. And I think Catherine, you actually have two questions. Can you unmute and ask your questions so that we at least get a chance for people to be able to participate? Because I think it can get tiring just to be listening. So how about we hear some voices from the floor? Catherine, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you very much. And I represent older women through the civil society group, the General Assembly of Partners, mostly dedicated to urban issues. But of course, we all hope to be older. And I think this applies to all of us. Yeah, sometimes it's forgotten in policy discussion. So I was just asking, to what extent are older women's issues included? In various lists, we see many, but we unfortunately don't see us recognized. And as I say, us is all of us. So I could address it to anyone, but I wondered, I'm trying to remember my exact question because I'm taking lots of notes. This has been
no problem. I can help you with one of your questions.
Please, thank you.
Yes, I think one of your questions was about the CEDAW committee, and in terms of coming up with guidelines to firm up the accountability of states to report on SDGs, and you were talking about if there is a thematic guideline for older women, I believe was your question. That if there are thematic guidelines for older women. So I think we can get from our panelists or even from the floor, anyone who feels comfortable answering that in terms of reporting on CEDAW. Do we have guidelines for reporting for older women? And I think you had also mentioned it with Priyanthi as well and Leah. So if any of them would like to mention something, and then we can have people from the floor also speak, that would be great.
Can I say just a word? I think that the issue of older women is not covered sufficiently. Neither, and we receive few information, especially from less, let's say, financially less independent countries. We receive a lot from Western Europe on older women issues, but less from developing world. And I would appreciate if the reporting on would be promoted and there will be developed more comprehensive guidelines for reporting on older age of women, because they are neglected and this is obvious.
Okay, that's important and really good to know. Thank you so much, Leah, for highlighting that. I know you mentioned the guidelines, which I assume, I think I said that wrong, it's also really about general recommendations as well. Has there been any? Do you think? Okay, all right. So I guess it's a critical gap.
There is a general recommendation on older women, I think, GR 20 something, 27.
20.
Somebody's
27,
yes.
But it's not legally binding in any way, like everything else we have. We have no convention on the rights of older persons, and we have no right within CEDAW either.
No,
But many of the general recommendations are being
we
used.
have under Sido, you have a lot of opportunities under Sido, but Sido should receive information. So we need your information and your voice in Sido.
So we need to see more reports with that in it.
Yeah, we
All
need
right?
more reports on that. That's it.
Yes. Great. Thank you so much. All right. So I'm just going to jump to the next question. And this was to Valentina. The question was, does your government, which I believe is Moldova, does it have established multi-stakeholder mechanisms that includes women's major group for implementing the SDGs? Valentina?
Thank you very much. I would like to mention that Moldova, at the beginning,
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Sorry, translation. I'd like to mention that in Moldova, at the beginning, Women's NGO and especially our platform for gender equality was involved in all process related to SDG implementation. But at the moment, it's a very difficult situation because the government is in transition. And I think we now to restart our hard work to push the government to be responsible and these issues. Thank you. But also I'd like to mention the last question. For example, Women's NGO and especially which support and in cooperation of HelpAge International in Moldova, we included older women's group as vulnerable group in our shadow report, and thanks to Cdo committee members, they address recommendation to our government to stress attention on the issues of older women. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Valentina. That was really useful information. Thanks for contributing to the other question as well. Okay, so please, if you do have a question, because I was scrolling through the chat, if you have a question, please raise your hand, because I see that I almost missed Katrina, who has been raising her hand. Sorry. So Katrina, I'm going to give you a chance to please ask your question or make your recommendation based on what has been discussed. So whatever you want to say.
Yeah, can you hear
me? Go ahead. Yes.
Yeah, so I'm speaking on behalf of the NGO Monitoring Group and Kyiv Gender Studies Institute, and my team leader has just raised the question to Leah, and so we would like to know if your comment on the situation when the same UN agency and specifically UN Women has a mandate to work with both government and NGOs, but actually coordinates as a
I think that it's very bad. I evaluate this type of binary very, very function, and generally work of country UN agencies on the country level with civil society are very unsatisfactory. I come from civil society. I reported to Sido several times before becoming a member. And if not IWRAW Asia Pacific, under UN Women and under pressure, on one hand being government person and on another hand being civil society activist, it's impossible. So I think that there should be funds, there should be opportunities for civil society to have independent influence and independent voice and independent action in their own countries. Otherwise, we will be all the time manipulated by government because they are controlling UN agencies. We should face it.
Yes, that's where we are going to.
Controlling UN agencies, and that's why UN Women active action towards civil society can't be sufficient. And that's it.
Yeah, thank you for your comment.
Thanks for the question and thanks for the comments as well. shows if we're going to work on these structural issues, we do have to face the issue of power and who wields it and who holds it, and that's quite important. There is a question here around how can we make the SDGs more accountable by using human rights treaties? So going beyond just setting indicators, but actually looking at the goal in its entirety and all of the relevant indicators. How can we make the SDGs more accountable by using the human rights treaties? So I'm going to open this to the floor. As well, if there's anyone who would like to comment on that or use this as an opportunity to expatiate on some of the points that they made already, this would be, I don't know if anyone is interested in doing that before I jump to the discussion questions. Anyone? Okay, while I wait, okay, Priyanthi, yes, please go ahead.
May I answer this?
Yes,
yeah?
Please. Yes.
Okay, because I saw this questions and I will highlight how we did it. We didn't stick only to goal 5 because the SDGs, all goals are linked together. What we did, for example, when we wrote about health, we took the goal that is related to goal 3, I think, in the SDGs, and then we linked it to goal 5 because it's linked also to goal 5, and then to goal 1, which is about poverty. So we try to see where is health can be affected by different elements, and we took the goals of the SDGs under the framework that those are the goals that we are reporting under it, and not only 5. And then we connected it to the article related to health in Cdo Convention, and we try to see where it is also in the IHL. We took all these elements together, and then we did the analysis based on these articles and goals in the section of health. The same we did in the other elements or the thematic the themes that we discussed in for the like Matalan GBV and for rural women. We did the same. We tried to see which goal is impacted, will impact this result, and how we can make accountable and recommendations for the state to take into considerations. And the recommendations, we raised it to the Prime Minister office and to the President in order to push forward that this should be highlighted in the National Action Plan for further follow-up. We are as a coalition following up on these issues now. Is it integrated or not, and how we can as NGOs make the government accountable to what they raised also in their reports, and also for the recommendations that we raised it to them.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Luna, for jumping in and answering that. So now I'll just give, sorry, Priyanthi, I'll just give you now the floor if you wanted to make some comments as well.
Actually, what I wanted to say, Mona has just said. Okay. I think it's about making the linkages between what is mandated through the human rights system, making them relating them to the different SDGs. And if you look at the more recent concluding observations of the CEDAW committee, you will find that they are doing a lot of that in some of the in their concluding observations relating health to the health goals, the education, as well as the more general discrimination and gender-based violence issues. So I think that's really important because I think we need to keep the primacy of the human rights system up front, because because of its accountability, because it has an accountability, it is an accountability mechanism. And if we don't let, and it's very easy for for states who don't want to be accountable to actually go the SDG path and ignore the human rights system.
All right. Thank you so much. Those were very, very useful interventions. Oh, okay. Leah, did you want to add something?
On this,
okay. Okay.
And which is now, especially in the period of COVID-19, in facing incredible pressure from UN structures. And we should face that, that it is under-resourced, there are no opportunities, no search for solution. So for 3 sessions, and we will have now first online review, just because we do not want to have a protection gap, but it's made, lies on shoulders of committee members. It's committee voluntary contribution, without any resources, without any support from the UN side. And we should face it, and it's deliberate. It's deliberate, and we should face that we are facing a critical moment for civil society to step forward and talk on behalf of human rights machinery. We need your support very much.
Okay. I think that's something we can definitely have a conversation about and see what we can do to support and to ensure that, you know, something changes in that respect. Susan also shared something that I really want to mention on the chat. Thank you, Shanaz, for sharing. So she's saying that you may be aware of the 3rd intercessional meeting of the Human Rights Council on cooperation between human rights and the Agenda 2030. It's on the 14th of January at 3 p.m. Central European Time, and the theme is Building Back Better, Integrating Human Rights in Sustainable and Resilient Recovery from COVID-19 Pandemic. So she's also saying that while they mentioned participation of all stakeholders, she's found no way to register, but they did invite people to submit written statements to an email address, which she included sdgs@ohchr.org by 21st of January, 2021. And it's going to be webcast. So please, you can look on the chat, that information is there for those who are interested in that. Okay, I'm going to let Martha speak because she has her hand raised. Martha, are you there? You can unmute yourself.
Я живу и работаю. Меня слышно?
Yes, we can hear you.
Спасибо. Я живу и работаю на востоке Украины, где сейчас женщины столкнулись с очень серьезной проблемой. С одной стороны, это военная ситуация, с другой стороны, это COVID, и с третьей стороны, это то, что все это наслоилось на те реформы, которые происходят у нас на уровне государства, а именно реформы децентрализации. Я работаю с женщинами, которые являются вынужденными переселенками и женщинами, которые живут по линии разграничения. Те проблемы, которые я сегодня слышала, и что они есть и в других странах, у нас переплелись в очень серьезный узел, как говорят, Гордиев узел. И проблема заключается в том, что не решены за 7 лет проблемы женщин-переселенок, которые подвергаются очень серьезным дискриминации, в том числе и сексуальной. Не решены за 7 лет у нас проблемы женщин, живущих по линии разграничения. Из 58 населенных пунктов всего в 18 есть доступ к медицинскому обслуживанию, и это в условиях ковида. И я бы хотела узнать и услышать, каким образом можно это повлиять на эту ситуацию на международном уровне, и в том числе с помощью тех инструментов, которые были сегодня озвучены. Спасибо.
Thank you, Martha, for sharing. That is definitely a tough situation to be working in. So I don't know if anyone would like to contribute in terms of what tools are available and what pressure points exist at the global level to be able to amplify and highlight these issues that she have mentioned, especially for women in migration, so enforced migration, let's be specific, as she said. So I don't know if anyone has any tools or has any experience doing this at the global level, or willing to offer advice on regional platforms that she can use as well to be able to highlight what is happening. Does anyone have any contribution responses? Anyone? Well, I feel like if anyone has, maybe you want to put your, Matthew, maybe you want to put your email in the chat so that people can reach out to you directly. So maybe people don't want to speak up, but if you could put your email in the chat.
Okay.
Yes, that would be great. So people can maybe send you tools. Okay. Okay, yeah, Priyanthi, you wanted to say something? You could.
Yes, I just wanted to go to what Berfu said, which I think was a very important point and also relates to what Mata's question about all these different challenges, intersecting challenges, which are kind of reinforce each other. So if it is a very difficult situation, I think we are in, because some of these negative forces are joining force to push back on human rights, not just women's human rights, but human rights in general. So I think the tools itself is only as good as there is a political will to implement the tools. So I think the way to go forward in any kind of these situations, I guess, is what somebody said right at the beginning, I think Martha herself maybe, that it is the solidarity of the women's movement that actually has to advocate and push for these things in create a voice that is amplified at every level, because the tools themselves are only as good as the people who want to use them, right?
Right. You're very right about that. I think, thank you so much for highlighting the idea of solidarity. I think that definitely brings up the issue that we all need to share what is going on and using those tools as well. And I think something Leah also mentioned is just the fact that these systems are also being undermined. So we have to work from the different angles to be able to not only share, but push as well, so that it actually makes a difference to people and their lives as well. So this has been a really important conversation. I really want to say thank you to everyone who stuck with us. This has been a long conversation. I really want to say special thank you to my colleagues at the Women's Major Group, Shanaz in particular, who helped to coordinate and organize this, because as we all know, planning virtual events are not exactly easy, especially after the holidays. So really want to say thank you to her, to Andrea, and to everyone who contributed to make this happen. Really want to say thank you to our panelists. We wouldn't get all of this knowledge if you hadn't said yes, for sharing your experiences. So we really find that valuable and really useful. For everyone who asked questions, who participated, who made comments, shared resources, thank you, because that is what all, Women's Major Group is all about. We would be sharing the notes and the recordings as soon as possible, so you will get all of this information and everything that we have discussed. Sorry if we missed your questions. There's just a lot going on in the chat, so please don't think we ignored you or ignored your question. We just want to make sure that we finish on time because we know that your time is also very, very valuable. So thank you all for making this first webinar a success. We hope you will join us for the next ones, and tell your friend to tell a friend to tell a friend to join us at the next webinars. And I hope people have points that they're taking with them from this, in terms of really understanding the linkages between CEDAW and the SDGs and really these human rights mechanisms to ensure that we can strengthen accountability, understanding better that the systems is also not strong on its own in terms of nation states, but they also require the support of people like Leah and those of us in the civil society aspect of it to keep pushing, to keep everything going. So all the best. Have a great week, everyone. Thank you so, so much.
Buky,
and I wish I could speak all the languages so I could say bye-bye.
Should we do a group photo to say thank you to everyone? We love seeing the voices of all our members and speakers at the very end. So if you could bear with me for about 5 seconds, I'll take the photos, screenshots of all of the photos. 1, 2, 3. There we go. Thank you all so much for making this an amazing meeting, an amazing first meeting of 2021. We'll continue this series monthly, so stay in tune for news from us. Many thanks.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Priyanthi.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you.